Imagine growing up in a place so small you can't even really call it a hamlet. It's more of a thorp. 10 or 20 people on a single dirt road, no heat, no electricity, no running water, none of that stuff. Your dad goes off to war, and about 6 months later, you find out he died in that war. So it's you and your siblings and your mom, and you pack up because you can't live there by yourself. And you head to the big city, a place called Yaroslavl, and she starts working in the cotton industry. You start in the rubber industry and then into textiles. And you also start working for the local Communist Party. But this is not exactly the most auspicious start for a first female astronaut of all time, but it is a start. And a pretty exciting one when we get right down to it. What's up? My name is Sean. This is History Undaunted, and this is the inaugural This Day in History. I should really get like sound effects or something for that. Yeah. So welcome. Valentina Tereshkova never really thought about becoming an astronaut, but she loved competitive skydiving, and she ended up being the leader of her local komsomol. A komsomol is like Soviet Boy and Girl Scouts. It's not really. No, it's more like the like young Soviet party for young adults, right? And she ended up leading the one in Yaroslavl. And this combination of traits, plus the fact that her dad died in the Winter War, brought her to the attention of a guy named Nikolai Kamenin. Now, old Nikolai was worried. He was in charge of the cosmonaut program for the USSR, and he had heard that the Mercury program in the United States was going to be recruiting women astronauts. So he wrote that we cannot allow that the first woman in space will be American. This would be an insult to the patriotic feelings of Soviet women. Would it? Would it really? Because you see, the thing is, the space race wasn't just this way for like the United States to like go explore things. Sure, the science was awesome, but what it was really about was a prestige game. It was a way to get one up on the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union was doing the exact same thing in return, trying to be the first at everything, to build their soft power, to look like the more successful, stronger country in this two-pole world where everybody was trying to pick sides and some people were just trying to stay out of the way. And the thing is, in the space race, up until the point when Neil Armstrong did one small step, it really seemed like the Russians were winning. Check this out. The first satellite, Sputnik, Russian. Laika, the first mammal, was Russian, and they sadly did not survive. But the first satellite to orbit the sun was Russian. The first landings on the moon, both like hard landing where they just ram something into it, and soft landings, were both Russian. And that was the Luna missions. These were unmanned, of course. The first surviving animals for space, these cutie pies right here, Belka and Strelka, look at them, duh, little patriots of the people's working class. The first human spaceflight, of course, Yuri Gagarin, and the first to orbit Venus and Mars, the first to return a craft from the moon, the first docking of a crewed spacecraft, which is something Gemini was also attempting to do. The Russians got there first, and even after the moon landing, the Russians were still trying to get ahead of the game. They got the first temporary space station up, that was Soyuz. They got the first permanent space station up at the very end of the Soviet Union, which was Mir, and of course they got the first space telescope up as well. So while we may see ourselves as like the pinnacle of space achievement, there's room for lots of people and lots of laurels in there. And one of the people who should get those, of course, is our person of the day, Valentina Tereshkova, who on this day, June 16th in 1963, became the first woman in space, and the only woman to do a solo space flight, and the only woman to orbit the planet by herself. This was the Vostok 6 mission. According to old Kamenin, who was the guy in charge of the cosmonaut program, he said she was Gagarin in a skirt, and was picked both for her personal story, the daughter of a patriot who was a good member of party standing, and for her more relevant, like scary skydiving skills and adventurous nature. But the launch went off perfectly. And when she got up there, she radioed, "It is I, Seagull," which was her call sign. "Everything is fine. I see the horizon. It's a sky blue with a dark strip. How beautiful the Earth is. Everything is going well." She ended up spending nearly 3 days in space, more time than all US astronauts combined up until that point, by the way, and flew alongside Vostok 5, which was with a dude in it. And they even got close enough to radio each other, but they never really got individual contact. Their flight, though, was broadcast on national television. The landing was bumpy and she broke her nose, but she quickly became a national hero and an international role model for women. At her first speech, which was given 22 years to the day after the start of the German invasion of Russia. And just a few weeks after she landed, she said, "My father perished defending our country," which, by the way, Finland didn't start the Winter War. Russia wasn't defending anything. They literally ended up taking land in that war, but whatever. And my mother brought up her 3 children. We know the bitterness of that war. We don't need war. In 1966, she became a member of the World Peace Council and studied to be an engineer while serving in the Soviet Air Force as a colonel. Later in life, she had a high-profile political career and sadly fell in line with the hardline Putin supporters, voting to remove term limits from the presidential office, essentially setting Putin up as president for life if he wanted it, and then voting against her stance on peace and disarmament for the invasion of Ukraine. Despite her controversial, in the West at least, political career after she was a cosmonaut, today is about celebrating her victories, her daring, her bravery, her contribution to the history of spaceflight and to women's history. So congratulations, Valentina.